The following is brought to you by Bleacher Report. If you guys want to check out my live post-game reaction show, make sure to have the Bleacher Report app downloaded and ready to fire up right after the game. You'll find me in the Chargers section. Bolt up.
Kyoto Bolt fam, it's the director coming back at you in Bleacher Report. My, oh my, just like that, the Los Angeles Chargers are 5-3, baby. Some momentum. We're seeing some momentum build up. The Chargers going up against the Titans next week. A possibility of 6-3. But more importantly, I'll say in this game in particular, the Chargers, in my opinion, have firmly placed themselves in the conversation to make a move on Tuesday, prior to Tuesday even, right? The Bolts at 5-3 look really good. The momentum's starting to build up. The team is looking like they could have a good season. And all of a sudden, if you're Joe Ortiz, the Chargers GM, you're thinking to yourself, all right, we got some pieces that we can move on. We got some players that would help this roster out in the second half push. It's time to get it on. And on the other side, which we'll talk to about here in a second, the Cleveland Browns. I think this particular opponent was actually kind of insane for the Chargers to achieve this in, because I view the Browns as a fantastic trade partner for the Chargers at the deadline. They're built very similar to what we want to be. They got pieces that would be instant plug and plays for us all over the roster. And they're in a situation now where at 2-7, with this experiment of Jamus Winston now debunked because of the Chargers, you are likely going to have to sell. Not just because of the loss here, but also because you got a Deshaun Watson contract that needs $70+ million paid up front next season, right? You got expiring contracts that are going to need renegotiation. You got a whole bunch of stuff happening that's really going to force your hand into making some moves before Tuesday. Yeah, if you're 3-6? If you were 3-6 coming out of this and the Jameis Winston, revelation and revolution was actually picking up some speed, maybe you don't give up on the season yet, but at 2-7, I think they do. I think the Chargers would be great trade partners for that. I'm talking, there's 3 players that I really want off of the Browns. Pretty good. That I think are not too far out of the realm of possibility, right? Greg Newsome could be really good. Who's the other guy? Is it B.J. Hill? One of their interior defensive linemen looked like a pretty good move for the Chargers as well. And then, of course, David Njoku. Greg Newsome, David Njoku, probably the 2 biggest ones. Like, those are guys that 10 out of 10 times I'm talking about trade there. I'm feeling about picking up the phone if you're Joe Ortiz and helping the Chargers out. But we'll build on that here in just a second. For now, I do want to talk about the ins and outs of this game in particular and why I think the Chargers are for real, for lack of a better term, because there are some, people thinking about the Chargers and their legitimacy this season based on their strength of schedule, right? The Chargers aren't necessarily in the worst situation when it comes to the opponents that they've faced so far, right? We've faced, the Panthers when they were at their worst. We faced the Raiders, who were kind of sneaky okay, but not great. We've just kind of led up to this point where the Chargers need to prove that they are as legitimate as they've looked on, the win-loss record. And I feel like the Cleveland Browns was a great opportunity to kind of show that, yeah, they're 2-6 coming into this game. Maybe, on the surface, it doesn't look like a good test of what they are. But the Cleveland Browns, at least when you're looking at the metrics, you're looking at some of the stats, like they're a middle-of-the-pack team defensively, and the Chargers kind of walked all over them. And this is a Chargers team that's really been struggling offensively this season to find an identity, find a way to move the football, and find players that they can lean on and rely on to have success on offense. They proved that to me this week versus a defense that's realistically not that bad, okay? The biggest reason I think the Chargers have finally started to find their footing on offense, resulting in, I think, the most points that they've scored this season in a game, is largely due, in fact, because of this mentality here. Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert is firmly back. It feels like the Chargers, when they went into the bye week, came out the other side saying, hey, we understand what we're trying to build here is not working. The run-first mentality or whatever, we're not quite there yet. Maybe with, the players, with the execution, with the scheme, whatever, it's not ready. So we're going to lean back into what this team does best. And what this team does best is lean into Justin Herbert and let him make some big plays. And boy, how did he make some big plays, man. How many 20-yard plus plays did we see from Justin Herbert this week, resulting in 282 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Yes, 6 sacks, which definitely needs a lot of work, right? We got a lot of things we got to do to that offensive line before we're anywhere near close to running the football as much as Jim Harbaugh wants to run the football. But my oh my, did Justin Herbert look like he is firmly back. This is the Herbert I remember from 2020. This is the Herbert that I remember from even last season for a majority of the year. Like, Justin Herbert is a fantastic thrower of the football, a fantastic top 10, top 5 talent at quarterback that this team must lean on more often, more frequently, especially in this year if they want to win football games. And it really feels like they've moved back to that mindset. And it's been awesome. On top of that, you're starting to see Justin Herbert with a healthier wide receiver room find confidence and chemistry with a lot of these guys. Last week, dude, was the Lad McConkey week. My word. He went for 111 yards, 2 touchdowns. He looked unstoppable. And to start this game, it kind of felt like that's where we were going again. The Browns could not stop Lad McConkey, who, mind you, they've got Denzel Ward. They've got Greg Newsome. They've got Grant Delpit. They've got a decent secondary. But they couldn't stop Lad McConkey, who went 7 targets, 5 receptions, 64 yards, 12 yards on average. Like, that's awesome. But the real story at receiver this week, which is going to shake a lot of things up come the trade deadline, is Quinton Johnston. Last week, we saw the Lad McConkey breakout. This week, it was Quinton Johnston. 2 young wide receivers for the Chargers have stepped up into a role and found a lot of success. I'm so, number one, proud of Quinton Johnston for his bounce back this season, for his ability to say, hey, man, my rookie season sucked. Everybody was throwing all kinds of shade at him. Everyone had already given up on number one. And to come back and have the kind of season that he's having, yes, he's not been on the field a little bit, but when he is on the field, we're starting to see what made him special at TCU. It's so obvious all of a sudden why it wasn't working last year. He's not Mike Williams. He's not a 50-50 guy. He's an underneath guy. He's a separator. He's a slant, sometimes perimeter, I guess. But he finds a lot of success in that play style. And the new coaching knows exactly how to use him. Of course, Jim Harbaugh, who had played against him, TCU, knows how to use him. And he's just been kind of going out there, awesome. I'm getting my words mixed up because I'm so impressed at what I've seen from him, especially in this game. This was, to me, the Quinton Johnston breakout game. He's had a couple of good games. This is the game where I'm like, holy crap, watch out for QJ. Because he's catching the football. There was one ball where it's like, maybe that's a drop on his part. Very difficult catch right behind his body. Sideline, there was a guy barreling down on him. Like, that was tough. Outside of that, he picked up all of his other receptions. 4 receptions, 108 yards, touchdown. And he did what this team desperately needs to open up the offense. He made the perimeter unsafe for the defense. The Chargers have not had much going on the perimeter this season. And I've mentioned this, I think, even in my last episode of Bleacher Report. Defenses have been sitting low with no reason to defend, the deep perimeter, the deep outside. In some cases, those deep middle zones or whatever. And it's really made life difficult on Justin Herbert, looking for his check down guys, looking for guys in the flat to make yards after the catch, because the defenses really have no reason to back off. Quinton Johnston showed that he can kind of be that this week. Even Josh Palmer, who broke a big one as well. What was that? What's his long on there? It was a 28-yard touchdown for Josh Palmer working the sidelines. Like, the Chargers are starting to attack that. It's really obvious when you watch defenses play the Chargers lately that they're looking at tape and saying, hey, play low as often as possible. We got to take that, after the catch ability away from Justin Herbert's receivers and force, kind of dare them to pass deep because we don't think they got the guys to make that happen. Quinton Johnston really opened that up this week. Last week it was Lad McConkey. He had that crazy touchdown on the sideline too. All of a sudden, defenses are going to have to start respecting the Chargers a little bit differently. They're going to have to start looking at this offense and saying, hey, dude, I don't know if we can sit low anymore. Herbert, he's going to sling it. And that was after, mind you, that Quinton Johnston touchdown, I do believe it was that touchdown. That was after Myles Garrett logged 3 sacks in 3 back-to-back plays. Back-to-back-to-back. Myles Garrett. Sack. Justin Herbert, it was 3rd and long, steps back with all the confidence in the world, slings it deep. There's Quinton Johnston, who goes all the way to the house touchdown. This team has some strengths, and they're starting to become more evident, more obvious. Justin Herbert, one of the best quarterbacks in football. Quinton Johnston's finally coming into his own. Lad McConkey. You can almost say the young receivers are finally starting to find their footing. I still think the Chargers need help at receiver. I do think they're going to be in the conversation DJ Chark, who I thought was going to be back this week, may end up returning next week, so maybe that plays into the equation a little bit. But I'm feeling very confident all of a sudden, as where I wasn't a few weeks ago, in the wide receiver situation. Quinton Johnston saw his breakout this week. Ladd McConkey saw his breakout last week. You know what that kind of tells me? It kind of tells me that Herbert's going to have a good day with one or the other of these guys, or even both, in any given week, because now the chemistry is there. Now the trust is there. I saw Justin Herbert throwing passes to Ladd McConkey this week that I was very used to seeing him with Keenan Allen in years past, because he just had that kind of trust in Keenan, right? He was like, I know it's a tight window. I know it's a tough catch to make, but Keenan's out there. We're going to sling it and give ourselves the best opportunity to convert. And he started doing that with Ladd McConkey this week. Quinton Johnston, again, he's not Mike Williams, but some of the passes that we saw that weren't 50-50, it's like, yeah, it kind of resembles a little bit what made him so comfortable with the Chargers offense, Justin Herbert, these past several seasons. I'm starting to believe, man. I'm really starting to believe in Quinton Johnston and Ladd McConkey as the future at wide receiver. I think we're still one sizable move away at wide receiver to truly bring all that confidence together. But other than that, man, I'm feeling very confident all of a sudden in the young guys finding some momentum here and giving me some relief at the position. As for running the football, I felt pretty good about this week as well, where I wasn't expecting to. I thought J.K. Dobbins would have a bit of a tougher week, considering that the Browns' run defense is certainly not that bad, but that the Chargers have really been leaning more in on Justin Herbert to move the football and to put points up on the board. J.K. Dobbins, I think, ended up being a benefactor to what Justin Herbert is creating on offense in terms of space. Dobbins, all of a sudden, all it takes for Dobbins is one or two opportunities to break free. He can take it to the house from pretty much anywhere on the field. It feels like he can do that much more frequently now, too. And Dobbins, man, again, 14 attempts, 85 yards, 6.1 per carry, which he didn't quite feel like that the whole game, but he was getting the job done. Of course, logs the 2 touchdowns. This team is showing that they're very much more than capable to being that run team that they want to be. But right now, the best way to help your run is just to let Justin Herbert be Justin Herbert, because with what J.K. Dobbins is showing, the danger that he provides, especially when running outside, behind the really nice tackles that we have, that space is very important. And Justin Herbert, with every successful game, with every game that he, is over 250 yards, close to 300 yards, he's showing that defenses can't, for lack of a better term, sell and just play up front, play down low, right? The space that's now becoming more apparent with every successful week of Justin Herbert is creating more opportunities for the run game to get going. And J.K. Dobbins has been awesome, right? I don't know if he's the answer for the Chargers indefinitely. If he's the guy next season that they're going into the year saying, hey, we need to get the extension. He's RB1. Let's go. That could still be the case. But for this season, very good solution. And buys us some time to maybe find more answers. Vidal looks like he's going to be a great, RB2, RB3 going forward. I would say RB2. The Chargers could definitely be in play for guys like Henderson or Janty or something in this upcoming draft that has a lot of really good running back talent, mind you. The team's looking good. Team's looking really good. Defensively, man, dude, punishing Jamus Winston. Let's go take a look at Jamus Winston's stats real quick. Jamus Winston throwing for 235, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, and 6 sacks. This is exactly how I laid it out in my preview video. Okay, I told you guys I would be disappointed if the Chargers didn't log at least 4 sacks. Well, they got 6 sacks this week, which is absolutely fantastic. And I told you guys that if that were the case, if the Chargers were getting to the quarterback consistently, if they were generating pressure consistently, Jamus Winston is the kind of quarterback that is going to throw ducks. And you know what? He threw a lot this week. He probably should have thrown 2 more interceptions. There were a couple of opportunities that the Chargers dropped in terms of generating more turnovers that would have been punishing to Jamus Winston's stat line. It probably should have been closer to 5 picks, if I'm being honest. And that is exactly what we were leaning on this week. I was like, man, Jamus Winston, everyone's kind of scared about, he threw for the 300 yards, 3 touchdowns last week. I was like, you guys remember this dude in Tampa Bay? Do you remember this dude in New Orleans? Like, he's going to have weeks where he goes bananas. But like the force, the will of the force, there's a balance here. You're going to see these days where the light side is prominent. He's going crazy with the yards and touchdowns, but then the dark side kicks in at some point. And he's going to be throwing those interceptions. He's going to be throwing those ducks. And the Chargers behind what I'm going to say was the pressure generated up front by the defensive line. Morgan Fox had a great week as well. put Jamus Winston in situations where he's throwing a lot of bad balls, and the Chargers certainly punished him for that, resulting in 3 interceptions and really helping put the game away in the second half. I'm going to say the second half for the Chargers offensively was a little boring, right? Not a lot going on, particularly in the third quarter. But the defense really did put on a show and help the Chargers in large part stay in control of the game. And that's the last thing we'll say about here on the defense. Dan Henley, by the way, we need to really pay attention to this guy going forward. This is a football player right here, man. It feels like, so far, what? 13 total tackles, 8 solo. Great stats, right? Great stats. But his impact on every drive was super obvious to me. He's been fantastic in coverage. He's been great versus the run. He's had the speed. He's had the awareness. He's had everything you're looking for out of a linebacker. This dude's for real. Like Dan Henley, sneakily one of the best Chargers defensive players of the season. Great game for him. Almost logged an interception as well. Derwin James, who also dropped an interception. 7 tackles. Yeah, he's looked good. He's had better seasons, but he had a good week this week. Elijah Molden, who logged an interception. Is this his 3rd or 4th? Maybe even 5th pick? I don't remember. Lots of interceptions. Great pickup by the Chargers there. Tareeb Still, one of the 2, right? There's 2 insane Chargers corners out of this class that have been really helping pick up the slack as we continue to lose corner after corner after corner. Christian Fulton was not active this week. Jasir Taylor at one point in this game exited. I don't think he ended up coming back. The Chargers just so lucky to have the talent that they do at cornerback, because it's working beautifully. Cam Hart had a great game despite not, crazy stats. He had an awesome game too physically. Khalil Mack ended up picking up the sack. Tooley ended up having 2.5 sacks. Cam Hart had the 1. Morgan Fox had the 2. Great week for the Chargers defense. They just continued making play after play after play. And again, this is the biggest thing why I feel like the Chargers, and we'll talk a little bit more about this right now, the Chargers should be buyers at the trade deadline, is because you have in front of you an extremely rare and awesome opportunity. And that's boasting a top defense in football. The Chargers once again only allowed 10 points. It was almost 3, right? The Browns had a garbage touchdown there late in the fourth quarter. When you have a defense this legitimate and this successful and this dominant, you don't want to waste that season. You don't want to waste an opportunity to say, hey, man, you've got the top scoring defense in the NFL. Let's help that offense match that production as much as possible. Because when you've got 2 sides of the football working that efficiently, you are a legitimate playoff contender. You are a legitimate playoff threat, and it's a season worth fighting for. Any season you have a defense this good, you've got to roll the dice a little bit. You've got to get better. You've got to strengthen up the offense so that they can keep up. Because if the offense can keep up just a little bit more with what the defense is producing, this team all of a sudden overnight becomes super scary. And this is why I continue to pound the table for a trade and an offensive weapon for the Chargers. Now that we've laid out the situation at wide receiver for the Chargers, let me explain why my number 1 trade target is what it is. The Quinton Johnston is really coming into his own right now. He's healthy. DJ Chark is coming back. We don't know his potential. I saw him in person at training camp. I'll tell you, he's a great weapon on the perimeter for Justin Herbert. He's a good 3rd down converter as well. And you got Ladd McConkey's going nuts, right? Probably Chargers wide receiver 1 right now. Wide receiver not looking as bad as we thought at the top of the season, right? You can probably still do better. Probably still make a move, I would say. Yeah, probably not a bad idea. But the move I want to make is at tight end. Because the Chargers, again, no disrespect to Hayden Hurst, the journeyman tight end. I just don't think he's it. Like, it felt like he was the doorstop or the segue to the next tight end. I don't know if we have time to wait. You know what I mean? The offense, it's obvious you need interior offensive line. That's something you could theoretically still trade for right now, but that position takes a while to get into the groove of things, right? You may be towards the end of the year by the time he actually starts picking up the offense the way you need to in order for that trade to be worth it. But a tight end or a receiver or even a skill position player on defense, like those guys are a little bit more plug and play. Like it may take a game or 2, but they'll be more or less a threat immediately. And that's why I think tight end is really the number 1 position I'm targeting if I'm the Chargers. And funny enough, I'm not seeing that position mentioned in a lot of, beat reporter or, articles and stuff like that. But to me as a Chargers fan that watches this team week in and week out, that has seen Justin Herbert with some good talent at tight end in the past, via Hunter Henry and then in the Pro Bowl a couple of times. Like, I understand that there is hidden potential in this offense when you pair him with a tight end that is reliable and somebody that he can trust. Because when you saw that, let's say in terms of safety valve play or underneath play or whatever with Austin Eckler, that trust led to one of the highest scoring players in the NFL in Austin Eckler at the time. I think that can still exist with a tight end in this offense. This offense is going to want to run the football. There are tight ends out there that can block their butts off while still being great offensive weapons through the air for Justin Herbert. That's kind of what I'm pounding the table for right now. Give me a tight end for the Justin Herbert offense, and good things are going to happen. And obviously, in beating the Cleveland Browns, lowering their record to 2-7, and likely putting them firmly into the seller's market on Tuesday, I have to mention David Njoku. Go after David Njoku. The Browns don't have money next season. They got to pay $80 million to Deshaun Watson, right? They got contracts expiring, this and that, blah, blah, blah. Give me David Njoku on this offense. Underrated run blocker, fantastic receiver. You're going to unlock a lot. And a lot of people say, let's wait till next season. We can look. It's not going to stop you from drafting Colston Loveland. You could definitely operate with two really good tight ends in this offense, right? It's not going to hurt you in terms of money. The Chargers have $100 million next season. And Njoku isn't the kind of player that you sign for one season and then let go of. No, Njoku's the kind of player that you trade for and you keep on the roster for 4 years, for 5 years. He's 28 years old, the sweet spot for tight ends in the NFL. That position can play into their mid-30s. Give me David Njoku. If I'm Ortiz and I'm trying to make the roster better, that's probably one of the top players that I'm going after. If Mark Andrews somehow is available, that's also somebody I would consider. But it's definitely interesting. So I don't remember if I have a show tomorrow on Bleacher Report, but if I do, we'll talk more about that. If not, I hope to leave you guys with this message. This win was massively, massively important for those of you guys that want to make a move before Tuesday. It's still not guaranteed, but the Chargers at 5-3 feel like buyers. If they were 4-4, who knows? Probably not. But at 5-3, with a defense that's playing as good as any defenses I've ever seen, the top scoring defense in the NFL, a season that you don't want to wait with that kind of defensive dominance, with all the resources in the world, including compensatory picks next season, it just feels like the stars have aligned. It's time to pull the trigger. And we may end up seeing a nice move by Tuesday. Maybe end up seeing nothing. It may be something, but it's mediocre. Who knows? But I think the season's worth fighting for. I think the Chargers' chances have gone up dramatically because of the win. I think Cleveland is a great trade partner opportunity because they're obvious sellers at this point too. And the sky's the limit. Very excited to see what the future of this team looks like and what the second half is in for, because it feels like when a Justin Herbert and a Jim Harbaugh team starts revving up, getting momentum, having fun, like we saw in that one play, they become a much more dangerous squad in the NFL. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been the Director on Bleacher Report. If you enjoyed what you saw here, hit us up with a follow here on the platform. We'll see you guys next time. As always, bolt up and stay frosty.